Piyush, thank you so much for joining me. So, I'm picking up on the latest data from the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways annual report on road accidents that was released on Tuesday. And it says that there were about 461,000 incidents in 2022, which was an almost 12% increase in accidents. But more importantly or critically, about 10% increase in fatalities. And the total loss of life was a little more than 168,000 lives, being an all time high. So, first, straight question, Piyush, why is this happening?
There are a few reasons behind this. One of them is that we have seen in the last couple of years with highway surfaces improving, we have seen a significant increase in speeds. And overspeeding is now the number one violation that we see on our roads. Now, when you look at speeding, a couple of more things come into play. The first thing is the safety of vehicles in which people are commuting, right? And what is the safety standard of these vehicles as far as the speeds are concerned? Are they able to withstand the impact at the kind of speeds at which people are driving these vehicles? The second piece is the aspect of enforcement. That given the newer highways or the kind of roads that are being built and the kind of vehicles that are available, are our enforcement agencies equipped to catch these kind of violations at the frequency at which they are happening? And the third thing is the road furniture. That while we are improving the surfaces of our highways, is the commensurate infrastructure that is required to prevent injury in the event of a crash, like a crash barrier or crash attenuators, proper signages, closure of gaps in median, and so on and so forth. Are these in place or not? And what we have seen is that these are the three areas within the realm of speeding which are problematic, because of which speeding continues unabated and is now leading to a very significant loss of life on our roads. The second piece is that we must focus on is what happens after the crash. Now, because we are seeing a larger number of crashes happening at higher speeds, the trauma care that typically has to follow has to be much, much more organized and advanced than it is today on our roads and highways. We are still seeing, 1990s era ambulances flying on our highways. We are still seeing paramedics and EMTs not being effectively certified or trained. We are still seeing multiple numbers existing for calling for help. We are still seeing hospitals having the same kind of problems that they have traditionally. So, this entire aspect of trauma care has to be looked at from a systemic perspective, and a framework has to be established that guarantees competent trauma care under the aspect of right to life in our country, which it currently isn't. So I think there is a significant problem in terms of violations, especially speeding, wrong side driving, and all of that. And then the post crash care being extremely weak given the nature of crashes that are now taking place.
Right. So, a couple of questions. So, one is on the safety of the cars themselves or the vehicles. In a very broad sense, I mean, obviously, there are many cars of different values and they're different constructs. How safe are they or they are not in the way we sort of see them on roads at the speed at which they're going?
So, there are two aspects to it. The first aspect is that when I'm talking about vehicular safety, I'm talking about the safety of buses, the safety of two-wheelers, and of course, the safety of cars. Unfortunately, the entire vehicular safety regime so far in our country has singularly focused on cars, even though they are a relatively smaller part of the larger equation that we are talking about. Now, coming to your specific point about how safe are the cars, the more recent vehicles that are coming into the market of a certain price category are relatively safer than they have been in the past. However, we are still seeing that the vehicles that the common man is using, the entry level vehicles, are still not safe. Whether we talk about cars, whether we talk about motorcycles, scooters, they are still extremely unsafe. And therefore, there is a relook required at the overall vehicle safety regime and the need to go beyond cars to look at other modes of transport that our people are using. For example, buses. Every other day, we hear of a bus falling into a gorge or a bus meeting a head-on collision or a rear-end collision, and a large number of people losing their life in those crashes. What about bus safety standards? So I think there is a significant look required when it comes to vehicle safety, especially the safety of vehicles that the common man uses.
Do you have any breakup there, Piyush, on, when we say, let's say 168,000 lives, I mean, what would be the breakup between bus and cars and two-wheelers and so on?
So there are two sets of road users, from a classification standpoint. One classification is vulnerable road users. These are people who are pedestrians, cyclists, two-wheelers, people who are exposed on the road. So we say human over metal instead of metal over human. The second category of vehicle of road users is metal over human, right? Which is slightly protected in terms of cars, buses, and so on and so forth. We know that the vulnerable road users is the chunk or the majority of deaths that are currently taking place. Nearly 60% of all deaths are involving vulnerable road users. And we are talking about, of this 168,000, nearly 50,000 just being motorcycle users. And then a large chunk of them being pedestrians, cyclists, and so on and so forth. So the vulnerable road users, the protection of vulnerable road users and keeping them safe, both from a road engineering design perspective as well as a vehicular safety perspective, therefore becomes extremely important.
Right. The people themselves and how they drive. You've given the external part. I mean, what's the message from you to them? Because that's really why you set up this organization and everything that you do today.
Yeah. My message is very simple. Vehicle in the hands of an untrained person is a weapon. And that weapon can and is killing people on our roads every day at this point of time. So what we have to ensure is that whether it is us who's driving a vehicle or whether we give it to someone else, we have to ensure that some basic safety measures have to be followed. Speed, for example, is very, very crucial. Every 1% increase in speed increases the chance of fatal collision by 3%. So we are talking about an incremental increase in the chances of a fatal crash with every incremental increase in speed. So that's one aspect of the piece. The second thing is that we have seen in too many crashes that because of convenience sake, people are doing wrong side driving, or because of impatience, people are doing wrong side driving. They have to understand that this is criminal behavior. This is not acceptable. This is not normal behavior. This is criminal behavior and should ideally be followed by impounding of the vehicle and severe punishment, because you are doing this knowingly. You are, threatening somebody else's life knowingly. So I think it is very important to understand that roads are a shared space, vehicles are a weapon, and the moment you allow that weapon to be used irresponsibly, it will end up taking a life. It could be yours, or it could be your family's, or it could be somebody else's.
Piyush, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you, Govind.